just wrote myself a note so that
I'm just about to let everybody in,
okay.
but I'm just going to set one more note in the. Yeah, we are live on Facebook. People are. Okay, I'm gonna just like let these folks in. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, we got 14 and we'll probably take a few minutes for others to kind of meander along, but I'm letting them in. And I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself. If you need anything, Dorothy, just let me know.
Okay, sure will. Hello and welcome.
Hi.
It's nice to already see a familiar face.
Hi, sorry, my camera is closed. I have problem with my computer. I apologize for that.
Oh, no problems. I'm glad you were able to join us anyway.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm from
Welcome.
Guam. So it's morning here.
And where are you coming from?
Guam.
From Guam. Well, welcome.
It's Friday here in the morning.
And tell me, how warm is it there?
Right now it's in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
which
Very
is
good.
cold, which is cold for us.
Oh.
We usually on the 90s and over 100, so right now it's cooler, so it's just good.
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska,
Okay.
and I believe it was 13 when I was driving home from school, and we just are recovering from 12 and a half inches of snow
Oh, wow.
in a day's time. So yeah, so 80 I think sounds wonderful.
That's heaven for us.
Well, I appreciate you spending your morning with us then.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me also.
So we may have a number of people whose username is Joe Campbell. So if you look in the chat, you may want to change that to make sure that your username is you and not my dear friend Joe. We're going to get ready to start in just a few minutes. I think Joe's still letting a few people in through the waiting room. Joe, if you want to give me a sign or a thumbs up when it appears that our guests are through and we're ready to get started.
Absolutely, Dorothy. My guess is there'll be a few more people kind of meandering in the next few minutes. But if you, I mean, if you want to kind of give it another minute or two, or if you just want to get going, I'll let them in. So.
Okay. How about we give it one more minute to honor the time of our friends who are here so that they can start their mornings or their evenings. So one of the beautiful things about webinars is having the opportunity to visit and to be in the comfort of our own homes. And I have to tell you that most of my presentations are done in my bedroom slippers, and I appreciate that. One of the downfalls is I do live with a very pushy cat, or two pushy cats, and one is a classic photo bomber. So if you see Paul reaching up for attention, I have found it to be worse if I shut the door. He knows how to put the doorknob between his paws, and he'll shake the doorknob and be more of a disruption there. So I'll apologize in advance if a little furry face photo bombs right in the middle, but he's pretty harmless once he's here, but I do apologize if that's, fortunately, there's no risk of allergens, with us virtually. Oh, and we have someone else who has 5 cats. Well, how fun. And do they rule and I suppose as cats will do, here he is, as cats will do, they run the circumstances of the home.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
This is Timmy. He's Timmy the timid. Except for when it comes time to photobomb. And when my school was completely remote last spring, he graced many of my Zoom lessons. And one of the infamous ones was his drinking of the water from our watercolor experience. So that was his claim to fame, and made quite a fun Zoom blooper reel that my children watched over and over and over again to see Timmy drink with the water. Well, Joe, I'm going to go ahead and get us started if you'll just let people in as they arrive. So hello and good evening, or good morning, or whatever time of day that you're having. My name is Dorothy Harman, and I'm pleased to be with you this evening, this morning, or whatever time of day it happens to be. I have an early childhood credential, AMS certified, and I am a teacher trainer at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. I'm a public school Montessorian. I have an EC classroom, and I am the author of Intentional Connections, published by Parent Child Press. So please do thank Joe Campbell. He is my publisher, my friend, and I often call him a dream maker because I didn't know I was to be gifted with the opportunity to write a book or to visit with so many Montessorians and teachers as I do, and a lot of that I attribute to him. So that's my shout out to you, Joe. So thank you. So our topic tonight, and this is the 5th in a series of 6 webinars. And basically we've kind of gone through the different chapters of the book. We've talked about what it's like to engage parents now, why it's so important that we are working together and building connections in light of us all experiencing COVID. No matter where we are in the world, we're all impacted by this. If we're working with children, we're all impacted by working with children, and where there are children, there are families and parents and caregivers. And so developing those relationships are significant all the time, but perhaps even more precarious right now under the circumstances. But before we dig into our topic tonight, which is celebration, our last one was a little heavy. It was about, having those tough discussions with one another. And if you're interested in seeing any of the previous webinars, they are on Facebook under Intentional Connections, and you can find, they're all archived there. But tonight we're talking about celebration. So let's celebrate who we have with us tonight. So if you would populate that chat box with who you are and where are you coming from, and if you are a parent or a teacher or an administrator, a head of school. So let's see who we have with us tonight or today or whatever time of day you're having. So as you were logging on, you may have heard that I'm coming to you from Omaha, Nebraska, where it is 13 degrees, where we had 2 snow days this week because we had 12 inches of snow in 24 hours. So I'm cold here. Let's see, we have friends here from Oregon and Virginia. We have teachers, Florida. Let's see, my dear friend Kristen from Omaha. Let's see, friends in Tampa, Florida. And let's see, some Virginia, California. This really is exciting for me to see people coming from all over and having connections. New Jersey, I'm a Jersey girl, originally born and raised. Yep. Chicago is here, where it's 23 degrees, so you're a little more tropical than I am. Wilmington, Delaware. I see people saying hello to one another on the chat, and that's fun how we are still able to make our connections. Even though we aren't physically together, webinars do give us a chance to reconnect with one another, to affirm what it is that we do and why we do it. So do we have any, let's see, I'm assuming that many of you are Montessori. Do we have any non-Montessori teachers? That's always fun to see as our audience becomes more diverse. So go ahead and keep populating that and keep an eye on it, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So I like to start webinars with a story. So, and this is my Friday mask. There's actually a pile of them. So when my school was opened, and I'm in a public school, and we opened up to 100% attendance. And, you know, there was a lot of emotion, and as there still is, about in-person teaching. And I know a lot in the private sector are open for children, but in my public school, where we are a school of 700 children, there was a lot of anxiety about, just, you know, the amount of people in one given space. So of course our district had some mask mandates, so we do have to wear our mask, which is a little comforting to me because there are 700 variables and they are all under 5 feet tall. So anything could happen. So I appreciate that. Well, my girlfriend from Tampa, Florida, sent me one of these smiley masks. And so I usually change my mask about midday at lunchtime, not wanting to put the same one on. So I would save the one smiley mask for Friday afternoons. So it kind of became known throughout the building that when you ran into Dorothy in the hallway, she would have her smiley mask on, but only on Friday afternoons. So my very sensitive friend, who is not an educator, but actually a CPA and working from home, was just sensitive to my needs. And so I received a package in the mail, one of those soft-sided envelopes. And I thought, what in the world is she sending me now? We kind of tease one another. We send one another random things. I'm known for sending her congratulations on the new baby. And she's certainly well beyond childbearing years. So it's kind of fun. And I thought, well, what's going to fall out? I ripped it off and I turned it upside down, and out came about 16 smiley masks with a note that told me she thought I should celebrate every day, not just Friday afternoons. So now, any given day, any given time, I have 16 smiley masks that I can change out to put a smile on my face, but yet to my children in my classroom who tell me, one particular child tells me that I can tell when you're really smiling, Mrs. Harman, because did you know your eyes crinkle on this side? And I smile and say, yes, I've earned those crinkles in 30 years of teaching. So let's see. So in our current state of where I am, where I am, where you are, what children are experiencing, what parents are experiencing is trauma, is stress. We have a lot going on with COVID. Those who are not in education are experiencing it in their realm, but ours feels very personal because we're used to being in close contact with children. We're used to our experiences being face to face. And so a lot of our situations have changed dramatically. And the first one has to do with our safety. So if you would populate the chat again, let's see, can you let us know if you are in person or if you are remote or if you are doing a hybrid. So in my setting, I'm in a hybrid of, we call it concurrent, which means I have some children in my classroom, I have some online, and throughout the course of the day, I'm running around with my laptop on my arm because I'm trying to give lessons to those children who are on Zoom and those children who are in contact. It's not the easiest teaching situation I've ever had, but I can see you've got a lot going on also in your settings, where many of you are saying that you are in person, some that are completely remote. So we know it looks a lot of different models, and a lot of our definitions of what school is has changed because of COVID. Well, what is going on with us? I always first like to look at physiologically. So if you've joined me before, you know I'm going to put my hand up like this for you to see. So our brain has three really important centers. Of course, we know it's much more complex than that, but for the purpose of our conversation, we're going to talk about our limbic system, or our primitive brain, which is kind of that brain stem. It's where we have our fight or flight or freeze reaction. And the main question of that part of that brain, of our brain, is, am I safe? Well, that's not a question that any of us can answer with 100% certainty, right? We don't know. So that kind of already sets us up for stress, and for children for stress, and parents for stress, because we don't really know the answer to that question. Well, fortunately, we do have a higher level of our brain where our hypothalamus is, and this is our feeling part of our brain. It's the part of the brain that advertisers, you know, when the Super Bowls have these fantastic jingles and songs, or songs that you can remember from maybe when you were 7 or 8 years old, this is where our emotions are housed. And it's the part of our brain that asks such an important question is, am I loved? So first we have to satisfy the am I safe? And we're doing the best that we can. And I can see by the responses in the chat that what you're providing to be safe looks at many different ways. But the part that I want to talk about tonight is the am I loved part. Because even though we are separated from one another, there are still ways to talk about, am I loved? Finally, we get up to the prefrontal cortex, which, if you see this part of your brain, and that's where learning occurs. Well, that's part of what we're about, right? Because everyone goes into to become an educator for that process. We want to see those ahas and those lights go off and those eyes dance, but we have to satisfy those other questions. So tonight we're talking about celebrations, because celebrations are part of how we answer that question of, am I loved? So here's our part of our brain that demands the answer to that question. Am I loved? Are we making connections? Do I feel that there are people that care for me? And then once I have that satisfied, then I can move forward. So when we're feeling satisfied, when we're feeling loved, it's because there's some wonderful hormones that bounce around inside of your brain. And they're listed there for you. And these are my happy hormone people. I'm a people person. Obviously, I spend my days with children. I spend many evenings and weekends with webinars. I love people. So that's where I get my happy hormones. I also enjoy writing, so I get happy hormones there. So if you will, again, if you'll populate that chat, where do you get your happy hormones? Do you practice yoga? Do you enjoy gardening? Are you a jogger? What is it that releases those hormones for you? I get up before school, try to most mornings, and I dance. I attend a virtual dance class, and I think anyone who looks across the street or in the window at 5:30 in the morning must shake their head and say, oh, well, she's at it again. But I know that that helps me to release those hormones, and it makes my day easier because I can answer that question, am I loved? Yep, I'm taking care of me. I'm certain that I'm loved. So if you'll see some of the wonderful strategies there in the chat of our friends and how they take care of themselves. So I want to visit a little bit about why, some of our whys of why do we celebrate? Why do we spend time in connection with one another? And perhaps you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. And we hear about it when you're in teacher training. You hear about it when you're in university studies for education. And you're going to hear a lot about Bloom's taxonomy in terms of cognitive skills. What we don't hear a great deal about is that Bloom's taxonomy also has a psychomotor taxonomy and the affective taxonomy. Well, this affective taxonomy has to do with feelings and emotions and attitudes, which is a considerable impact in our classroom and has been considerably altered as a result of COVID. So if you look at this taxonomy, if you look down on the very bottom, you can see it's where we receive ideas. So I liken that to the statement, I'm listening. So it doesn't mean you're having any big buy-in to what is being shared. It's just, I'm listening, I'm here. The second part of the taxonomy is responding. And that's what I like to see you doing in the chat, because it raises your level of engagement. It raises your level of feelings about our topic, or your attitudes, or maybe even the emotions that are underlying as we'll talk about some of the issues this evening. As we move up the taxonomy, next is valuing. And that's where you start to, well, I don't quite agree with that. That's where our opinions are, or I'm 100% on board with you there with that one. Next comes organizing, where we start to take and look at whatever's being shared. Is this part of my values? Oh, I can adopt that, and that resonates with my value set, or I release it because it isn't a part of what I would consider. The highest is characterizing, and that's when we take in the information that we hear, see, feel, and we attach them to our feelings. We embrace them with our attitudes, and they become a part of our emotions. So that's where we want parents. That's where we want children. It's in this part of the taxonomy where we can depend upon the character of somebody. So we can say that I can feel pretty consistent that Joey or Bobby or Susie they're going to behave this particular way with this experience in our classroom. Or it could be, I'm pretty certain that Mr. or Mrs. are going to respond this way based upon their character. It's where we can depend on one another. So it's an important part of the development of the child. It's an important part to the development of the human being, adults as well. But we don't hear a lot about it because we're so focused on what are the cognitive skills? Are they learning their sounds? Are they learning to compute? And we often forget that what is really very sensitive and as equally important is, how are they feeling? What are their attitudes? What kind of emotions are coming up? So I'd like, if you would, to take a minute to read this statement. It's from my book. And imagine what that would look like. What would a setting look like where we all came together to work together and find joy in being in one another's company? I don't know where you are emotionally, but I've seen a lot of division in the world in the last 10 months, right? It's as if our affective domain is all over the place. We don't know who to count on. People's behavior is so erratic. Things are so different. And it's as a result of that question of, am I safe? Right? Am I safe? Am I loved? But when it does all come together, I think it sounds like a pretty good reason to celebrate. So here's some ideas that I'd like to share with you from the good old days, back when. So Intentional Connections was written in between 2015 and 2017. And if you had told me that there was going to come a time that we would be separated from one another, I would not have believed it. So these are some pre-COVID strategies of how to connect and how to celebrate with families. And so it's just some rules of thumb is to help parents to be successful back in the day and in the future when they're able to come and spend time with you in school or at events. Make sure you set them up for success. So if you have a regular communication with a parent, with parents, and I highly advise you to consider regular newsletters or some sort of form of communication that will let parents know, okay, on Friday afternoon between 12 and 3, I'm pretty sure Mrs. Harman's newsletter from her classroom is going to land in my inbox. Okay. Parents are more likely to read your newsletters if they know when to anticipate they're going to be there. And if we're having a special event, I want to make sure I let them know about 6 to 8 weeks in advance, because nothing is worse for a working parent than trying to wiggle out time to attend something at school if they only found out about it 2 or 3 days ago. You know, that's not setting them up for success. Sometimes you may want to ask for an RSVP if everyone's going to have someone in attendance. So here's my class picnic, and on the right-hand side, you can see parents that are sitting on the floor that they've come to a Take Your Parent to School day where they're spending an hour with us. And the children have specific works that they're sharing with them. And it's an hour long so that if parents are depending on what their vocation is, maybe they can attend for a longer period of time or maybe not. And if they can have to be flexible with a lunch hour, then there's enough time for them to attend an event, because we want them to be successful. We know that by the research, if we have IT and EC people here, infants, toddlers, and early childhood, you're the front lines. When parents become involved in their child's education, they're more likely to become involved in those levels of education, and they're more likely to remain involved. So our elementary age teachers, if parents haven't engaged prior to them, your challenge is greater. So bring them in and get them started early. Make them feel welcome. Help them to see just how valuable their child's time with you is. And protecting of their time. Now, I wouldn't host a huge celebration. Welcome to school, and parents, come on in. And it's the third day of school. It'll be a disaster. You'll have tears and no one will want them to go when it's time for people to go. And that could happen anyway, but we know how important normalization is, that children have a chance to adjust to being at school before we bring people in, their dear loved ones in, and then send them back out again. So we have to make sure that we have time to allow for that. So I'm sure your schools have had events in the past. They could be music concerts, as you can see the children sitting on the risers there. That's a community event at my school. Perhaps parties. We're about to approach Valentine's parties at my school, and there was much discussion about, is it going to be safe for children to take home their paper Valentines? So we'll make sure we include in newsletters, if you don't feel comfortable, let them sit for an extended period of time in the garage, perhaps, before they open them. Nothing's going to be opened at school, but it still felt like it was still something that we thought it was manageable. So the teachers overwhelmingly supported that we continue to move forward with a Valentine's party, although parents are not able to attend, of course, under the current circumstances. You see the photograph there in the upper left. We have a community-wide event that celebrates Montessori, and I just had to throw this picture in this presentation because you can see their school pictures and on the popsicle sticks where they have Montessori on one side and their picture on the other, and they became a little vase that sat and became a table decoration at the event that celebrates all the Montessori children in my public school district, where we actually have 2 elementary sites and 1 middle school site. And so we got together once a year to celebrate all things Montessori within the larger context of a public school district. So, and do you remember field trips? Oh my goodness. My children certainly remember field trips. Every now and then someone will ask, are we going to go on a field trip? And I honestly think if I could get us just on a school bus and drive around the block would be so exciting. They miss those events. So again, in visiting with my friend Deacon, who helped me to walk past the playground for the first 6 weeks of school when we were not permitted to go on the playground equipment. And he'd ask every day as we walked past, is this the day that we can go on the playground equipment? And I'd say, not today, Deacon, but when we can, it's going to be so fun. So that's my phrase that hangs with me all the time. It's going to be so fun. When COVID is done, oh, it's going to be so fun. So those hard questions of, can we go on a field trip? When do we get to go on a field trip? Well, I'm not sure, but as soon as COVID's done, we're going to go on a field trip, and it's going to be so fun. And having classroom visitors, former parents coming in and spending time with us. This is actually a former parent and a former administrator who brought her quilts to share with my classroom. Oh, and do you remember or do you implement arts projects? Oh, these are my personal loves. Art shows, art exhibits. There's a picture there of our all school play. Was going to be my 20th written and directed at our school, only it was cut short because of COVID and it never went to full production. One of my heartbreaks. And costumes. Can you see the children? That's actually my front lawn. So in my world, parent engagement doesn't stop at the school. Now, I know this isn't comfortable for everyone, and so I'm not advocating you try something that you don't feel comfortable with. If your gut doesn't feel right, then don't implement it. But for your consideration, on Halloween and on the 4th of July, I invite my class to my front porch. Now, I'm not having them parade through the house. It's not a free-for-all or anything like that. But we think that we are protected and private, but actually one Google search and any parent in my classroom knows exactly where I live. So on Halloween, they come and trick or treat at my front door, and myself and Mr. Harman dress up as pirates. And it's become quite a tradition to have children come and see us. And actually this particular group of little friends, Mr. Harman has a special place for in his heart, and he rakes up the leaves and puts them in a pile so that they can come to our house, trick or treat, and jump in our pile of leaves. And then COVID happened and all of that stopped. Does the need for celebration stop? It certainly doesn't. Does our need for connections to one another stop? Absolutely not. So now we have to just do it differently. I visited with a group of Montessorians in Tennessee on Saturday, and one of our topic was about the impact of COVID. Well, COVID makes us do things differently, but in Montessori, we're used to doing things differently. We're used to our children doing things differently. So we're going to just have to look at the conditions differently, and how can we still connect with one another. So one of the things um, that I have implemented is making mountains out of molehills. You know how children with, they get upset about things, and we try to calm them down that it's, is this a big problem or is this a small problem, and how do we need to handle that, because small problems are a lot easier to take care of. Well, this time I want to exaggerate the positive. I want to exaggerate our wins, if you will. So making a mountain out of the molehill is what I'm advocating. This was around the holidays, and we were watching the Nutcracker, very big event to have the opportunity to stream that into. Can we go to watch ballet right now? Can't. But streaming was available, and when you add a little cup of popcorn that maybe has an M&M or two sprinkled in it, and suddenly the Nutcrackers started arriving. Well, one of my assistants brought her collection of nutcrackers, and then another child brought another nutcracker, and another, until apparently we were celebrating nutcrackers and we didn't even know that's what we were going to be doing. So taking those little ordinary things that you do and creating a celebration with that. Well, those parents were involved because certainly children were not absconding with nutcrackers out of their house without their knowing, so they were able to bring them in for us. How about drive-bys? Okay, let's see if you can do that. Raise your hand button there. Have you participated in any drive-bys? I've been to probably a half dozen to a dozen birthday parties where honestly, when we were on remote learning, my husband and I were happy, and he'd go in the car with me and we'd drive by. You felt like you were on a parade float, and you'd wave your hands and honk your horns. It was a different way of celebrating, but it was certainly something that made connections to children. And then on the last day of school, I wanted my own drive-by. So I, once again, made sure that my parents know the address, and these are two of my friends driving by for me. I had my own drive-by party. And amongst many tears, there I stood waving to all of the children that were able to come over, and it was quite a fantastic event. So go or drive by where they invite you. We tend to think of ourselves as, oh, well, if I go to one birthday party, I'll have to go to another birthday party. So, I smile politely and I say, oh, thank you for inviting me, but I'm never really going to go. Right now, if it feeds you, if it releases those happy hormones to drive by a child's house on your way to pick up your groceries or to pick up a Starbucks or wherever you happen to be going, then I advocate to go and drive by. Watching a child's face light up as you drive by their home is pretty exciting. So this was, do you see the jolly old fella there in the window? Now, we're supposed to be executing social distancing here, and it didn't happen at all, because in the month of December, my husband let his white beard grow in, and he donned a hat, and he donned a Hawaiian shirt that had Santas all over, and there he was in the window. So if you can see the little guy in the front with his teal mask, you may have thought the rock star just showed up outside the window. He's one of my quietest children, and he just stood and screamed, ah! It was the most exciting thing he had seen. Now, some of my other children were asking, is that Mr. Harman? And some of the other ones were saying, no, I think it's Santa. And I just abstained from answering the question and said, I couldn't see. There was so much sun coming in. I'm not sure what was going on. But for that brief moment, and you may disagree with me, and that's okay. But for that brief moment, those children were not children that had to deal with COVID, that had to deal with life being anything different. Whether they were caught up in the emotion, and he visited the other classrooms and you could hear the screams coming from all of the classrooms. And I thought, this may not be the level of imagination that we know our 6 to 9 children are experiencing. And I don't know how you feel about perpetrating the legend of Santa. But in that moment, the only thing that mattered to me was that my kids were happy. They were thrilled. They were excited, and it was worth the celebration. So Zoom, right? Many of us are just remote. So how do you make that special? Well, you can see we had our school sponsored a superhero day, and there we are showing up on Zoom with our superhero costumes. We also utilized on the last day of school last year, we utilized that waiting room, and parents like to have that picture with you on on the last day of school. And I didn't want parents to miss that. So they sat in the waiting room and waited for their turn to be let in. And my two assistants and I posed for last day of school pictures via Zoom. And so it took some time for 31 children to usher their way through, but everyone was very gracious and very kind. It took us about 45 minutes to an hour to have all the children come in. They took their picture with us. We had a chance to chat with them on the last day of school. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience for me. My happy hormones completely washing all over me. It had been tough to be remote, and I know it doesn't resemble anything that, for those of you who are completely remote, doesn't resemble anything that we've ever done in the past. But taking a minute to get a picture taken with each child to say, I'm so proud of how we have done this year. How does it feel for you? And of course, they were very proud and very excited to spend that moment. And I think there were a few moms and dads who were pretty, well, I'm certain with 31 of them waiting for 45 minutes to take a Zoom picture, I'm certain that it had meaning for them as well. And then came something that I had completely unplanned. I wish I had, but it was a brilliant stroke of luck, coincidence. So I had one of my parents who reached out to me when we first went remote and said, you know what, I'm ordering caterpillars. Would you like some? And I said, sure. Yeah, that would be really fun. We have them in the classroom. We love to watch the metamorphosis. Children love this experience. I would love to do that. So I used a parent platform, a parent communication platform, and we had a butterfly cam. And so every day I would film, maybe 15 seconds of the camera of the butterflies, or at the time, they were these tiny little caterpillars that sat on my kitchen counter. And so if parents logged on to their information app, then they could see and share with their children every day a little bit of difference of what the caterpillars were doing. So the first day they were teeny tiny caterpillars, and then in time they became the larger caterpillars, and soon they were hanging upside down. Metamorphosis was beginning. Well, had I planned it, it would not have worked. But the last day of school, those butterflies were ready to be released. So in much poetic fashion, we had our one final Zoom as a whole group before we were doing class pictures. And I took the butterflies out onto my deck, and there you can see one in my hand, and the children and I watched them flutter away. And it was significant, as was everything that we had experienced through those first early months of COVID. It was significant. There was so much symbolism in the freedom of watching the change, just how much I had grown, how much I had learned, how much children had grown, how much they had learned under circumstances that no one could have ever predicted for us. And just in that moment to watch it all kind of flutter away was, for me personally, you may have noticed on my slides there in the corner, there's always a butterfly. It just signifies such hope to me. You can see their, yeah, thanks for the chat there. Can you see their little faces just watching them, different faces of awe. So our celebrations helps us to build resilience. It helps children to build resilience. You know, Facebook can be the such a divisive place, but every now and then something shows up that I think, well, there's some value in that. So building emotional resilience in children is significant, and our celebrations help those to happen. But it's also to remember to take care of you in this process. And I kind of um, liken myself to a teacher's pastor, if you will, that taking care of you is important too. And one of the most significant things that you can do to build your resilience and the resilience of your children is to build connections. Having an emotional awareness and an emotional and an intellectual understanding of why it's so important that we connect with one another helps children to be more resilient, and it helps you to be more resilient as well. Also, to be mindful of your thoughts. Is it I've been in our past visits with one another, I have given anyone, not that it's up to me, but in speaking about permission, giving myself permission, you permission to say, gosh darn it, this is hard. This is not what I was planning to do. This is hard. There are things that are dividing us physically. There are things that are dividing us emotionally, but not to take up residence there. You know, we all are entitled for those moments that it's hard to think, oh gosh, maybe just one more cup of coffee will make it just a little easier to deal with breathing through a mask all day. But not to live there forever. You know, have your moments to say, oh, this is tough, but be mindful not to live in it. To be mindful of, you know, I need to be optimistic for myself. I need to see something that is different than what we're experiencing now. And if it's helpful, find yourself a friend who you can be very open with to say, whoa, okay, we're going to have our 15 minutes of, we're going to lay it all out on the table, and we're just going to complain up and down and all around. And then we're going to pull one another up, and we're going to say, okay, yes, but. My son, as a 4-year-old, that was his favorite phrase. Yes, but. And then we'd move on to something else. Well, I've started to adopt that yes, but also. Things are tough. Yes, but we're not going to do it forever. Finding a friend, caregivers for our children, you find your sense of humor. That helps us to be resilient too, in minding our thoughts. You know, I'm a breast cancer survivor, 14 years now. And at the time, my oncologist, he said I was one of his favorite patients to come in, because I would come in and I'd say, well, you know, how are we doing? Are we fixed now? Because, you know, my last pair tried to kill me. So, you know, I'm ready to work on this new pair, and are we doing better now? And he would laugh and he would say, you know, it's in your sense of humor that helps you to get through the trauma. Sorry about that, Joe, for that may have been too much of a story for you. Not one that I usually share in mixed company, but it helped me to get through. And in times of stress, we have to laugh. Watch the silliest movies. My husband and I are spending way too much time with TV, but we've been watching some old classic, just silly movies, because it feels good to do so. And in laughing, those happy hormones wash around your brain, and you're taking care of yourself. Eating right, hard to do, I know. The COVID-19, yeah, some of us are packing on more than we should. remembering to spend some time in exercise, remembering to spend some time breathing, meditation, whatever it is that is your thing. You know, as in our earlier on our chat, we saw some of the things that people were doing that releases their happy hormones. Make sure you take time to do that. Let yourself off the hook. School doesn't have to be your only thing. There's no one going to receive a prize for being a martyr during COVID or at any other time. Teachers teach well, show up fully when they are caring for themselves. So I hope that all in our solutions to our problems, and we've got a nice laundry list of things to work on. But Dr. Montessori was always hopeful. She saw so much potential in how we can raise up children so that we can see a brighter future. And that hope is so important for us to hold on to right now as well. And it gives us some wonderful things to celebrate. Now, I know that it's not just my ideas. I know we have a very wise audience that comes and spends time with us. So here's the list of references if you're interested in more research. Here's my contact information if you're interested in purchasing a book. Make sure you're populating that chat because Joe wants to give away some books today. But if you want to unmute, let's make sure we're doing that kind of on a one at a time kind of basis. I know you have some wonderful celebrations that are going on. I know the nature of educators and the nature of Montessorians to do things differently. So I know there are things that are going on in your schools and your classrooms, and we are always trying to gather information from one another. So if you feel comfortable to do so, let me see if I can get as many of you on my screen as I can see. But if you want to unmute and share, if you would, your wisdom with the rest of the group. Yeah, I have someone asking to go back to references. Sure, there you go. So what else is going on? You know, I think when we come to the close of each and every day, I think there's something to celebrate there. There's certainly things that at the end of each day. Now I have to be completely transparent with you. I'm retiring from my current position at the end of this school year. And so my celebration is a paperclip chain. And every day when I come home at the end of the day, I take a paperclip off and I throw it into the jar. Because I know there's that many more days left on that paperclip chain till my next good. And I hope you will forgive my moment of choking up with my butterfly pictures, because some days that's easier to celebrate and some days it just is, it's a hard to let go of event. And other days, I can't wait to put that paperclip into the jar. It just depends on the day. Let's see, Joe, are there questions from earlier?
There was a question that we did get earlier, and I've sent you a note about that, along with 3 names, which I'm not sure. Maybe you can find one of them in the audience right now, and we can track down the other folks if they're not with us anymore. But they're in the chat to you, Dorothy. So.
Our three friends who are receiving a book.
Yeah, you might have to go up the chat just a little bit.
I see them. Jackie Riccardi, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing your name, Jackie. And
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Joe, do you want to make sure that they, do you want them to message you or send you an email with their contact, with their mailing information?
I should have their email address. You can go ahead and send it to me though. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And let's see, Cheryl D. Danzo. Am I saying that correctly? Cheryl, is Cheryl still with us this evening? And let's see, Rajashri William. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing names. So thank you. Thank you, three friends, for joining us this evening, and congratulations. I hope you enjoy Intentional Connections. It was my labor of love. And it has provided me lots of wonderful opportunities to spend evenings with you in talks like this. Let's see. Great. Okay. So it seems like we're being shy, and you know what happens every time we have one of these Zooms? People are shy, and they'll wait, and a few people will sign off, and then a few more people will sign off, and then we'll start chatting there at the end. So that's always kind of fun. It gives us a chance to get to know one another a little better. We tend to be locked in our little Zoom boxes here. So I enjoy that if you would like to stay, or if you have something that you would like to share.
Did you want us
Please.
to raise our hands or?
Yeah,
just-
go ahead. Go ahead.
I just have a comment. The children are starting to come up with scenarios of what life would be like without COVID. So you can see that it's really starting to affect them. Although in the classroom, they're very positive and resilient, but internally something else is going on with a lot of them, and it's becoming sort of a trend. They're talking about how they're going to destroy the virus and what they're going to do when it's gone.
Yeah.
And, I believe that we do have to stay on the positive, absolutely, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that they're still it's like they're in a period of grieving.
It is, yes.
So
Yeah.
I think it's important that we just extend a lot of grace.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And that's why I included that affective domain, to show that there really is a lot of different levels to what we feel and where our emotions lie and what attitudes exist. And so as I've experienced these webinars, I've heard things that and experience it within my own classroom, that attitudes are a little different, and sometimes that translates to children as behavior.
Right.
And so we are seeing behaviors that perhaps we haven't seen before, or to this degree. And it's all in that very basic part of the brain, looking for, where am I safe? Where are my boundaries? So when we extend grace within, and that freedom and liberty within our firm boundaries and parameters, because we know how important order is, especially for young children. And the world looks a lot disordered. We were counting on adults to take care of, those big adult issues. And sometimes the adults have made it more difficult. We turn on the evening news and think, well, that's not helping.
I just don't watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. It will not produce those happy hormones to wash around your brain. I can promise you that.
We have enough drama in our own lives.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's also important that we kind of bone up on the tools that we can provide the children, things that maybe we used to do that we really need to make sure we're doing, just to help them to identify their feelings and to manage them, just by, they know how they're going to feel internally. So, the little stoplight thing, I've mentioned that before, but I don't know where it comes from. But anyway, they'll say, I feel like I'm in the yellow. And then the children, will say to each other, well, let's help them get back to the green, that kind of thing.
I have found myself this year, my children don't sit on a circle in the line. We are socially distanced first thing. And I love to read children's books. I love to write. So books mean a great deal to me. When I share children's books, I find myself using the word, and have taught them quite specifically, the word empathy. Empathy means that you are feeling someone else's feelings. And children's stories are wonderful places to do that. Today we read an old book by Ezra Jack Keats called Goggles, and there's some big boys who are trying to steal some goggles away. And so I checked in with the children and said, are you feeling big feelings? How do you feel about those big boys? And they were aghast that, those big boys were being mean and they didn't like them. But we were acknowledging that has big feelings. I'm also reading during our quiet time, our chapter book time, we're reading Charlotte's Web. Well, eventually, and it's coming sooner, and I'll start warning them that I have probably read Charlotte's Web at least 24 times. And there's just one chapter that I don't get through without my voice quivering and tissues, coming out of my sleeve to dab at my eyebrows or at my eyes, because I've got big feelings. And so I think giving children permission to have those big feelings right now, and ourselves permission to have those big feelings. And maybe there's something cathartic about crying for Charlotte. I don't know. Thank you for sharing. Hi, Nancy. Have you unmuted?
I have. So I wanted to say, I've been away from the classroom for a while, a couple of years, never too far away from schools and Montessori people. But I wanted to congratulate you on your retirement and let you know there is life after Montessori. But I have
I'm just
found,
moving to my next Montessori, so
I was gonna say,
in a different state.
I know, there's another level. There are other tasks still awaiting you. But I also wanted to say I am so impressed and so proud of everybody who's in the classroom or doing this virtually and taking such good care of our children and their parents, because it's hard. I know. I mean, I have grandchildren who are working their way through school virtually, and it's very difficult. But I just wanted to let everybody know that you are doing good work, and you should every minute of the day pat yourselves on the back for everything that you're doing. And it's almost February,
Yeah.
Look how far you've come already this year.
Yeah.
So, good for you.
Yeah. Every day is a celebration, even if it was a hard one.
Yeah, at least you got through it.
There's reason to celebrate, even when sometimes the celebration is, it came to an end. But the brilliance and of people who work with children is that they get up the next day and they do it again, and that brilliance is there. Intellectual brilliance, yes, but a brightness about people who spend time with children. My husband, when we go to Montessori conferences back in the day when we used to be able to go in person, well, he's usually the guy you'd see floating around the pool, and I'd be out mingling amongst the people, and he would say, there was a conference, I know there's a group of I don't know, pharmaceutical reps and a group of Montessori teachers, and I can tell the difference between the two groups when they walk through the lobby, because Montessori teachers and teachers have an expression of hope. He says, I don't get it. Their feet barely touch the ground, but there's such hope. He calls it the fairy godmother conventions. Yeah. Anybody else? I'm happy to announce that Timmy has attended the entire workshop. He has my left leg completely asleep, but he did not photobomb. So he's been here with me the whole time, but might seem to mind his manners.
Can you hold him up for us to see, Dorothy? Or
Here's Tim.
it's very cute.
He's been on my lap the entire time, and I cannot feel my left leg at all. So we have any other stories to share, comments? Thank you, Nancy. It's, I know we all need that pep talk, and we in Montessori tend to look for that intrinsic motivation, but right now teachers need a little bit of external. And thank you for
Absolutely.
providing that.
Absolutely. It's well deserved.
Thank you. So if we don't have any more friends who want to chat, I so appreciate you being with me. And those of you who are the late stayers, so this is designed to be a 6-part talk, and I want you to guide me in what is number 6 going to be about. What do we need to talk about? Are there ways that I can support yourselves and myself in this journey through COVID? Is it about that? Is it about, I don't know, children? Is it about an opportunity to share? Is it a safe place to complain? We can provide all of those kind of spaces, but I want some input from you on what do you want the next one to look like? Part of my motivation in asking you that is we've covered my whole book. And so there are no more chapters other than the acknowledgement chapter. And I love to praise teachers. And I could do that, but I thought, instead of going there, maybe I'd see if there's something else that's pressing to talk about.
You know what I think, Dorothy?
What's that?
Hopes for the next school year. Like how people really hope it'll be, and how they can achieve as much excellence as possible next year. I think a lot of people are looking forward to next school year.
Yes. Yeah. We could talk about that. And I know that there's been some concern, and there's been questions about, are children behind? What is that going to look like for us next school year? I don't know if that's the biggest question right now, because I think those big questions are here first. Yeah, Sheila.
I just think that we also have to consider that, even if COVID is gone, that this might be a different way that we have to get used to, with the hybrid thing and the Zoom and all that.
Yeah.
And how to make it more tangible for the children, how to make it more Montessori, I guess, because there's a lot of direct teaching. Maybe just to brainstorm, because even if it's not, even if we start just like a regular year and then we have to switch over to Zoom, if we had some kind of like tools ahead of time, because everybody in last March was just dumped into it, and everybody was winging it, and it was just crazy chaos, but everybody made it through. But I think that when you go into something prepared, it's not as, number one, not as chaotic, number two, not as scary, and then you feel empowered, and that you can just do it. It's just part of what we do.
Right.
So
Right.
That's my thought.
Yeah. That, I think there's real value in that, seeing how do we do school differently. Now we're learning many things. I was visiting with a school via Zoom that has one designated remote teacher, and that teacher's in South Africa and the school's in Florida. And she said, the head of school said, I think we're going to keep this. This is something that we have children from 3 continents that are attending our school and will never, may not ever step on our campus. So I think it's, there are lots of ways to do things differently. The thing I wish I could find, and if there are any historians in the group, is to see if Dr. Montessori had any writing about the Spanish flu. She would have lived through that pandemic. She would have been alive during that time. And there would have been Montessori schools at that time. And it was not, certainly not the size of Montessori as we're familiar now. But the schools would have been impacted. You know, if you were in Italy, perhaps you just, moved, expanded your outdoor environment, which probably was what was happening. But by that time, there had already been spread of Montessori schools by 1920. So if there are historians in the group that have access to anything, I'm just curious to see what her writing would have been. What were her words like at that time? Yeah, and because she had the medical doctor background, what was her understanding? And I've seen pictures of children working outside with masks on, but none of them looked like they were in a Montessori school. They were all still very much shoulder to shoulder, not social distancing at all, but they had their masks on. But then with the pictures that I shared for you, those picture taking moments, social distancing goes right out the window. Because we have to celebrate either Mr. Harman in the window or a photo op as we're all laying on a peace quilt or something along that line. Yeah, I think there's another question about that remote learning. Yeah, we could certainly talk about what it looked like and what lessons we've learned there. Heavens, because you're right, it was baptism by fire, wasn't it? We just you just woke up one day and you were, Zoom was not a part of our regular vocabulary. Can you remember that? Way back in the olden days when Zoom was not a noun and Zooming was not a verb. It was was an interjection or an onomatopoeia, and that was the extent of the word. And now it is our life source to one another. Yeah. So do we have any other questions or comments before we log off? I thank you for spending your evening with me. Do please reach out if you have questions or comments on my Facebook page or on through email, and I would be happy to visit with you. I am in the classroom. I am instructing a class right now, and I am part of the American Montessori Society first cohort of instructor certifications. So I'm a little busy, but I promise if it lands in my inbox, I will get to it eventually. It just might take me a couple of days to do so, or at least to the weekend when I can catch up. But I would love to share more with you, and if there are private concerns or things that I could be of support for you with, please do. Reach out. So Joe, I think we're going to wrap up our evening.
That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and